And here's we got part two to an update here with Maritime Attorney Nyree Alfonso. Pleasant good evening and welcome once again, Ms. Alfonso.
Thank you very much for having me on again, Mikey. And
Yes.
good night to your listeners.
Yeah, no, listen, this thing is mind-boggling, and let's put it where it needs to be. I mean, every day, and which is good. We're starting to connect the dots. We're starting to get the information. As a matter of fact, we're seeing now it's a mysterious spill because have we gotten confirmation as to what the substance is?
Again, the government has had, the Institute of Marine Affairs and EMA and so on have gotten involved in testing the substance. But whether the result, well, I can't say whether. The results, as far as I know, have not been released.
Right. And you were saying basically, in order to get some sort of, word on what this was about, some sort of, to hold anybody accountable, if possible, that we need to go after the tugboat identified as the Solo Creed.
Well, yes, as I said, either you go after, I don't mean that you have to go after physically and ascertain whereabouts she's hiding out, but you certainly need to find her owners or her managers or her operators, and more importantly, you need to find her insurers.
You need to find
right?
insurance, okay?
Her insurer, who has insured this vessel, because as I said, I assume if you are operating through the Panama Canal, you will have proper third-party liability insurance in place. And that insurance, as is called protection and indemnity insurance, P&I for short, insurance. So you want to be able to look at obtaining compensation either directly from the owners or hopefully through the insurers, and you want to hope that that insurance is in fact valid and has nice and robust limits to allow payment for the cleanup that clearly is going to go on for some time to come.
Yeah, but in all reality, I mean, these were not people who were simply hauling a cargo of Bibles or doing something. I mean, this was an illicit trade. When you start to add it up, when you start to connect the dots, this was an illicit trade. And one doesn't expect that there's going to be documents as far as being above board, documents that are going to be real. It's not going to be. I mean, so taking all of that in consideration, and the fact that as far as the marine laws are concerned, many which are still on the books, still in front of a subcommittee since the year 2000, where do we go? I mean, how do we start putting this together?
Well, I mean, we as a traumatism in unfortunately dark waters when it comes to their liability regime, the ability to recover. Because I've identified there are several conventions, including MARPOL, one the most people know is MARPOL, the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, right? And that is as old as 1973. We're not talking about any fresh convention obligations. And in fact, there have been several updating protocols to MARPOL. While we may have signed MARPOL, we haven't brought MARPOL into our laws. And so it means several pieces of legislation have come up in Parliament and in the Senate and so on, which are lying in the dustbin heap. They came up, they lapsed, they were never brought into force of law. There's a shipping act somewhere in cyberspace, which has been, floating around for 4 or 5 years. There's a 2020 version, there's a 2021 version. These are draft bills which incorporate, these international obligations incorporated into our domestic law, which is what is required. These things are not enforced. So some things have been signed, some things have not been signed at all in terms of treaty obligations, but even what has been signed is not in our law, does not have force of law in our law.
All right, okay.
So that is problematic. Now,
right.
When it comes to oil pollution in particular, these funds and conventions and so on establish what we call strict liability, meaning, you don't really have to prove negligence on the part of the ship operator, the master of the vessel, the crew of the vessel. You don't have to identify what they did wrong. You merely have to say, well, what you were carrying is now on my shores, or now in my waters, now polluting my waters, now killing my fish and my marine environment. That's all you have to allege, not how, when, why it happened, bearing in mind these things can happen way out at sea where there are no witnesses. At least no witnesses who can speak. So we don't have those things, so that we would actually, even if we found these people in our local law, we'd have to prove that they did something negligent. They mismaneuvered, somebody didn't tow it properly, but that's it. For another reason, for those of us, who deal with ships from time to time, we do know that sometimes a ship can go down because of some inherent debility. A plate fails, there was a hole, something fails, some tank separator fails. Some reason can cause the vessel to overturn. Now that would not be negligence. Let me rephrase that. It would be very difficult to prove negligence in those circumstances. So you might be outside even the normal regime which you can take.
All right. Now you said that there's a difference between a barge and a tug, as most dumb barges can hide, since they do not have automatic identification system, which is the AIS or GPS tracking.
Mm-hmm. That is correct. So there are self-propelled barges which would have that equipment, but the bulk of barges are dumb barges of some form, to carry materials, tanker barges like this one appears to be. All right, I said whether she's called Coolie Boy, whether she's called Gulfstream, whether that one is a former name or one is a current name, there's a lot to be found out. But the fact is she's a tanker barge. So she was carrying in her lower tanks, she was carrying some form of fuel. I said I don't think it's crude oil, but I think it's some form of processed fuel.
All right.
And it requires, let's say, testing to be able to ascertain two things. What is the substance? That will help you manage how you're going to control the substance and have what displacements to apply, displacers to apply, what materials to add to it, and will also aid you in, it's like a fingerprint. It will also aid you in detecting where that product was produced or refined, as the case may be. So you can footprint it or fingerprint it, as the case may be, to assist in tracking its source.
All right, because the automatic identification system, you said that there are countries that do not allow you to come into their waters with that being off. So, this is someone...
That is correct, but my sources, and these are international sources, as of today, reported into me that Solo Creed, which of course would have AIS, hasn't turned on her AIS for 15 days. That speaks volumes that this vessel is hiding.
Okay.
I've made the point that a vessel has to stop for fuel, it has to stop for food, water, that kind of thing. So it can't forevermore remain out at sea, so it has to make a port of call. And I say many well-regulated ports do not allow a vessel to come in with her AIS shut off. Even in Trinidad, the Coast Guard can tell a vessel to switch on your AIS while you're in territorial waters.
Well, does this mean, can we say then that whoever's doing this has to be someone with great experience that understands how long, of course, they can be off and where they can go and what areas they can...
Yes. Oh, yes. I mean, you mentioned in our first exchange that, this reference to the dark fleet, and there was some literature coming out on the internet with respect to Venezuela's dark fleet. But, that's not unique to our neighbor. There are other areas of the world where there are so-called dark fleets, meaning fleets which are part of their modus operandi is to hide. For whatever reason, they're smuggling some sort of, uncustomed goods, they're moving drugs, and certainly they're moving contraband style or sanctioned oil and oil products. Those will be the main vessels which will be, dodgy and dodging detection.
All right.
So that's another thing. When you switch off your AIS, you're dodging detection and tracking.
Right. So let's walk through this so we can break it down so people can understand. So Solo Creed started this journey, correct?
Sorry, another call was coming in. I I just lost you.
Okay,
What was
right.
that?
Solo Creed started this journey.
Yes.
Right. Coming through the Panama Canal, it picked up a barge called the Coolie Boy.
Right? Or, as I said, her previous name could have been Gulfstream because there are massive gaps in the documentation or even the Solo Creed. The Solo Creed was sold last year, June or July, I forget which one, but one of those months. And the current ownership is very much clouded.
Right.
So similarly with the barge, there's very little literature turning up, track, right, of this vessel turning up. Now, many vessels, as they change hands from Nyree to Mikee to John to James, each owner will change their name so that you may have started off as a Gulfstream and you may end up as something else because the new owner will make make the decision. They say it's bad luck to keep the old name. I don't know if that's true, but most owners change the name of what they buy. So this could be two vessels which change hands within recent times, which is why I say two sets of names are coming up.
All right. From there, it headed to Guyana. It was heading to Guyana, or that's where it was heading, to Guyana?
Well, the information that has come out in the news media is that she had, and this has been confirmed by Guyanese authorities, that she had a port of call in Guyana. So she was loaded, and she was heading to Guyana. So therefore, Guyana said that the vessel was overdue and had not arrived. So therefore, her intended port of call, whether to offload or to take on stores, which I think it would be to offload, but we don't actually know. But the Guyanese authorities would be very much aware, just like we have a Maritime Services Division, they have something called MARAD. Their Maritime Administration is called MARAD. If you are going to come to Guyana, you have to file, your local agent have to file certain papers with customs, with immigration, and so on. So that information would reside with the Guyanese authorities.
All right. So heading to Guyana, something happened, vessel overturned, and Solo Creed said, listen, I don't want to stick around for this, and left. Is that it?
I very much think so, and one of the reasons I believe that the accident happened a good ways away from where we discovered whichever the name of the barge is, on the reef. I believe that overturning took place a few days before February 7th. And one of the reasons we suspect that, as a lot of this is suspicion, the government has all the tools available, to do the proper investigations and to report into members of the public who are very concerned. Fishermen from Tobago were reporting what they thought was a slip, but which was dismissed, I am told, as sargassum grass, but it looks like this very much was this leaking, and wind and tide will bring upside down or right side up. Wind and tide will bring the barge in.
All right.
Whether she was right side up or upside down or partially tilted, wind and tide will bring her in.
And of course, the tugboat must be held liable in all of this. So,
well, if there was a here's the point. So if there was a mismaneuver on the part of the towing tug, they did something wrong, they got into trouble, they cut the lines, and that's the protocol. If you get into trouble towing a barge or any vessel for that matter, you cut the towing lines, because what can happen is that vessel that is being towed can pull the tug, which has crew on it. Most barges don't have any crew on it at any material time.
Right.
You can now endanger lives. So whatever they did is something happened, whether, say, a plate failed, a hole was developed, it struck something, there's a lot of investigation that has to take place. They left, that's very unusual as well. If you're not doing anything wrong, the first thing you will do when something goes wrong with your tow is send out an AD or an SOS.
Exactly.
Which will be picked up by our North Post radio and other similar installations in surrounding islands. So it would be perhaps us, perhaps Grenada would pick it up, Guyana, because she's passing to the north of Tobago. So anything close to there, including Trinidad, which should be able to pick up their VHF radio signal. So usually you get in trouble with your tow, you don't abandon the tow, and I've made the point, bus it and go, right? You'll be calling to alert. If you're doing something above board, we would want to alert the authorities, the closest authorities, which would have been Trinidad and Tobago, that there's a situation which is potentially hazardous to your environment.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't be talking about Grenada, looking out for oil spill or wind
That's
and
right.
tide taking it to the ABC Islands, which is what happened when there was a spill from either Heritage or Parry a few years ago, right? That wind and tide took it to the ABC Islands. And I made the point, equally dependent on tourism as is Tobago. Equally is Grenada.
Yeah.
Right?
I want to thank you so much again. We're going to keep looking at this story, and if any new developments, definitely want to have you back on the Observer, because I think
and I'll certainly reach out to you.
Thank you so much. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much, Mikey.
Thank
Have
you.
a good night.
Bye.